This is the Cardinal Cowboy Show.
Giddy up! Woo!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again live in the Cardinal Cowboy studio. We do get to get some pretty interesting, powerful, fun, and just all around good people. Bill, and I'm talking about you, man. So we have in studio here Senator, Missouri State Senator Bill Eigel. Fortunate to have you come in the studio here. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm telling you, things are getting real exciting, right? We are
right.
1 week away, and now it's a matter of all the big changes. We'll talk about it. I jump into some serious topics sometimes. Some people don't like that, but I'm one that doesn't like to pretend I don't know what I'm talking about, and there's no reason to be uninformed. So I get into the issues. So a lot at stake for this big upcoming election, Senator, and talk to us a little bit about what you've got going on. You effectively won your primary in a landslide, if you will. Was it by 57 points? Is that what
57 points.
Okay,
57.
so you're doing well.
It was a strong result. Strong result.
That's a very strong result. And with that, now you're up against the same guy you ran up against prior. Beat him obviously last time. Think that's going to be in hand this time, pretty well.
I'm very optimistic. Very optimistic.
Don't want to jinx yourself.
That's right. We're working hard, but we are optimistic.
That's awesome. Well, tell us what's going on in your world, and we'll hit on some of the topics.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. With 1 week to go, I think that probably everybody that can hear our voice right now is excited to have less than a week to go, just because all the commercial and TV ads will stop after Tuesday of next week, and we don't have to see all the same folks pointing fingers after that. So I think that's going to be a real relief for everybody. But the broader question here in this election is, and you hear politicians say this on a regular basis through any election, that this is always the most important election. And really, I think that's true this year, because more than ever before, we've never had more government than what we have right now. We've never spent more of your tax dollars. We've never gotten involved in your health care and all the things that are getting into your living room, into your business, to the degree that government has in the past. So for anybody like me that values freedom, that liberty, the free markets, those things are in question right now. And unbelievably, I couldn't have imagined this 20 years ago, but one of the two major parties has embraced the anarchy and lawlessness that we've seen in some of our urban cores for the past few months. And I have always been on the side of law enforcement, and I think that's kind of key to the Republican brand. I've been endorsed by the law enforcement, I've been endorsed by the firefighters, and I think that you'll see this a very stark contrast that we're going to have to make if we're going to continue to build upon the success that President Trump has led to over the past 4 years, or if in spite of all that success, we're going to make a decision to go in a different direction. So I'm optimistic that we're going to keep on the same path here in the next week, and I'm ready to make it happen.
Well, I mean, this is as exciting as we've seen in my lifetime that I can recall with regard to, literally what's at stake. I mean, we're talking about the issues, and just like you said, for most all of my life, it's been a matter of, okay, you see some of the perspectives from the Democrats, you see some perspective from the Republicans, and you kind of pick and choose, and there's some that kind of overlap a little bit depending on what your perspective is. I have a tough time with that sometimes, but because somebody who's come from a bad situation in a coma, lucky to be here, but didn't ever want to be a victim. They tried to program me as such. They said, you're not going to be able to take care of himself for the rest of his life. Some people question that still, if I can take care of myself or not. But I've seen where the philosophy really adapts to some people. They espouse to gain that kind of power over people as a method for helping them, quote unquote. Right. I had this discussion tonight at dinner with somebody I'm close with, and confiding in them. They love to help people. They love to. I said, ultimately, I think that comes down to a matter of you like to help people, but it ultimately, and I said, this is the way we're programmed. This is my perspective, but ultimately, we always want to do what makes us feel good, when it comes down to it. And hopefully, what you're doing to make yourself feel good is something that benefits everyone, right? When you do a win-win, and that's a matter of what approach do you take for that. But a lot of people are very self-serving, right? And we know where that ends up, and that doesn't last long. But others act as though they're trying to help. And they put in policies that may seem to help, and it's almost like they can't realize, they have to realize, and many times we know they do, that they don't really help. They help to keep people stuck. They help to keep people dependent. And that's right, kind of the divide for me is. And then what side do you fall in on that? And do you understand that? Do you really realize that? A lot of people don't get involved enough to realize it. where are we at with our is it getting worse now? I guess is where we're really at.
Well, first, to answer that, let me go back to the foundation of the country. The country, the United States, was founded on the idea that empowering the individual citizens of the country through liberty, through freedom, through free markets would ultimately make them more successful than massive government involvement making decisions for them in their lives. For the past 200 plus years, the United States has become one of the sole superpowers in the entire planet. And the reason we've done that is because our economy has been vibrant for hundreds of years, because the free market, not because of government intervention, has driven everything from new growth to new inventions to driving the American public to new frontiers as far away as the moon. So it's very clear what our founders intended. Now, today, we're having discussion about whether or not we should move away from all that and move to more socialized programs, the socialization of our healthcare industry, the socialization of our education industry. And we have to make a decision if we're going to stay on the path of free markets and liberty that ultimately put us in this position in the first place, or if we're going to change direction and turn over a country to the next generation, to our kids, that's far more dependent on government intervention, that's far more dependent on government to tell each of us what to do. I don't subscribe to that. I think that the more we empower folks to pursue their own happiness, give them the environment that treats everyone equally, the more successful that all of our communities will be. In fact, if you look at just look here, right here in the St. Louis region. St. Charles County is the fastest growing region in the state, or fastest growing county in the state right now. And the reason we're that is because we're a low tax, low regulation environment, and we attract people that want to move their businesses here, raise their families here, and we stand in pretty stark contrast to the city of St. Louis. The city of St. Louis has more government than any other area in our region. They're engaged in more different aspects of their citizens' lives and take more tax dollars out of their citizens' bank account than anywhere else in the St. Louis metropolitan region. And look what that's done. People are leaving the city, crime is high, and the government is overwhelmed. So I think that the answer is pretty clear, and I think that the voters are going to continue to support individual liberty and freedom on November 3rd.
Well said. I mean, that's a great summary, because if you really, if you study the history of this little country, it was espoused and created with the idea that they were escaping from tyranny, right?
That's right.
It was, you had kings and you had peasants, and not much in between, right? And for how many centuries was that the method, right? Or dynasties, and that's kind of the same thing over in China, whatever. But somebody came up with this innovative idea. I said, hey, if you let people do for themselves, everyone might benefit from it. I think
right.
Adam Smith, right? Wealth of Nations. Look that up, everybody. Am I right there?
That's right.
Wealth of
That's
Nations. Well-studied senator. Appreciate that. And it was amazing what we've done now. So now we have created an environment where we have, essentially, we can provide more for the poor than we've ever been able to provide, taking more people out of poverty.
That's right.
And it seems then it must be a matter of short-term memory loss, because it wasn't too long ago. There's only a couple other countries that we all have heard of very well: Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, or
Soviet Union. That's right.
And it's just like, it never has ever worked. It's a method for somebody who says, I've never really created anything, I've never really done anything, but if I just promise everybody that I'll take away from the guys with the money and give it to the people who don't have it, I'll get some power, right?
That's right.
And effectively, it's that strategy. Am I right, or is that crazy?
No, I think that's absolutely right. In fact, let's go back to the monarchies for just a second that we declared our independence from back in the 1700s. You know, the king, which is where all the power was vested in early civilization, was also surrounded by a very elite class of either royals, elite landowners, or powerful special interest. And right now in the United States, in Jefferson City, in Washington, D.C., we are also seeing a great expansion of some very powerful special interests. And their objective is to transfer the benefits of government to a very select, elite, few number of folks, away from you and I, into those powerful special interests that pour lots of money into our elections, that pour lots of money into sometimes telling us very false things about the ballots initiative petitions that are coming to us on the ballot. And their interests don't necessarily align with everybody in my area. So we have seen time and time again that our form of republic, which is a form of a democracy and empowers a capitalistic society, has elevated more individuals out of poverty than any other form of government in the history of the planet. We have seen more folks being able to change their class, been able to pursue their dreams, been able to build their businesses, to be able to raise their families successfully, however they define successfully, than any other form of government in history. You don't have to look, when you and I were growing up, we had the Soviet Union. And the idea that we would be having a discussion today about whether or not we should adopt some of the core principles that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union in America today is incredible. When we talk about socializing our healthcare industry, look at how much the costs have gone up for insurance and for medical service. When we talk about socializing our educational system, I don't know anybody, no matter how you feel about education, I don't know very many folks that are happy with the outcomes we're seeing in our educational system right now. So we have a very clear history of being successful with personal liberty and free markets. I think the country is going to decide to continue going on that path next Tuesday.
Well, that's what we're looking for. I mean, it seemed as though there was kind of a gray area with regard to what people really wanted. If they knew what was, these people look like they're helping just in a different fashion. These people look like they're helping. One calls themselves Democrats, one calls themselves Republicans, one's conservative, one's liberal. They're all kind of mixing together. It's just a matter of, but we've seen straight up anarchy now. It's like they're destructing buildings, they're terrorizing businesses.
Burning businesses.
I mean, it's literally
murdering people in our streets.
the opposite. Yeah, a great, well-known retired police officer just shot at gunpoint not too long ago. They made the national news again. Another police
Michael
officer.
Dorn. That's right.
Another police officer not too long after that, I forget his name. But literally, I mean, it's just changed the method that they have here. It's just as if, it made me feel, sadly, have we done so well to kind of push that anarchy, that antithesis, that negative style even that was kind of confusing. We're helping people, we're not, to where they've given up. They've realized so now they've just got to throw their fists up in there and start creating chaos, and that's what they're doing to take over now. And
that kind of anarchy that we've seen in our urban areas, not just in St. Louis, but in Portland, in Seattle, and around the country, that type of anarchy has had very little toleration in our country for the past 200 years. What's different about this year is, for the first time ever, we have a major national political party, the Democratic Party, that has elements of it. Not everybody in the Democratic Party, but too many in the Democratic Party are embracing groups like Black Lives Matter, groups like Antifa, that you can agree with the words Black Lives Matter, but the reality is that organization is embracing chaos. That organization is embracing the destruction of the livelihoods of those that live in those urban areas. And that is a message that could go far beyond any single election. If too many people in America decide that it's okay to take from your neighbor or destroy what your neighbor has in the name of a social justice program that is not really about what it says it is. So it's frightening. And I think that a lot of folks don't want to see our communities descend into chaos. They don't want to see the national narrative set by incredibly divisive, violent, criminal groups like Antifa, like Black Lives Matter. And I think they're going to come out and they're going to send a message on November 3rd that law and order means something. Protecting our police officers means something. Protecting our first responders, standing up for the rule of law. These things mean something, and they're much more fundamental than even any party platform. And I'm ready for it on November 3rd.
Well, great points. Literally, I mean, it's been the most volatile situation I've seen in an election in our history. I mean, like I said, it was a matter of, I believe in this strategy. And then you get into where, for them to essentially justify what they're talking about, you just have to take a quick fact check and you're like, that was a blatant lie.
That's right.
Fracking. He's not going to do fracking.
That's right.
Joe Biden, Mr. Biden says, I'm not going to, fracking I won't do it. Just look at 3, 4, 5 second snippets from other interviews or events that he's done when he's had, a dozen people there at his event, and he's saying it straight up was, we're going to get away with it. On the debate. He said that, and go down the list of misrepresentations. It seems as though, and this is where I say I don't want to be too at all disrespectful to anyone, but it seems that there's a lot of people, to put it politely, kind of disengage from politics. They disengage from the actual method. They hear the headline, right? We've talked about this. I talked to Chrissy Summers earlier today, representative, and most people, they've studied this. Dr. Naputi brought this up. They see the headline, but they don't read past the headline to realize the depth of what's really going on. The headline might even be the shocker, right? They got to get the attention, got to sell the advertising, blame it on the capitalists from that perspective. But you got to get into the depth of it. And so many people do not dig in past to find out. Oh, by the way, we found out this was not the whole story. The big one that's going on right now that's driving me crazy is infections. We've got all these people that are dying or are getting infected, and you start to look at now we no longer have an infection pandemic. We have a true pandemic. We have an infection pandemic where they're talking about there's nobody dying anymore. I put a post up.
That's right.
I saw from KSDK. And if you want to share your stuff right now, this is a good chance for you to. The stream is coming through there on my fan page. Or I don't know if you had a chance.
I did.
Okay, good.
I did. We're rolling.
You're doing it faster than I can keep up with you. Senator right here, ladies and gentlemen. And so they posted 200,000 deaths, and I said, I just plainly said, look, nobody's dying from this anymore. And it's not zero, but it's down to where your odds are far less than getting hit by a car and run over. An accidental death, they call it, about 160,000 people a year. Now that we've got our curve down, and then you start getting into the real numbers about how many people did they send to their death because they sent them back, the people that were infected, to go live with the nursing homes. What states did that? New Jersey, Michigan, New York account for about 42% of the people that died because they infected the people that were most vulnerable, and those people didn't have to die. So when you really start to analyze this, it seems like Biden now is going with the approach that it is straight up, COVID has not been handled correctly. You need me in there in office rather than Trump. And I say, you must be not paying attention if you realize that the only people who completely mishandled this, and Trump did what he is instructed to do by law as governor or as president, is to say, let the states handle this, and I come in and help them if they can't. And some of the states he allowed to handle it, obviously, they went the wrong way, and he had to come in and fix it afterwards.
Right.
But people don't realize that, and they see that this is your option or that's your option. This is the guy who comes from the party that we're all doing it the wrong way. When he was vice president, H1N1 was a completely disastrous handling that he was involved with, or not maybe in charge of, but at certain levels they said. Talk about that. Is this what is staking? Is this what they're using to control this elections?
Well, and absolutely, and part of the thing that makes what you just described worse is the fact that I think now more than at any time that I've ever seen in my life, we have a media that is incredibly dishonest. I think that folks, when they see somebody like Joe Biden lying about his positions on fracking, there's a sense that maybe that's just politics, and we expect that behavior from politicians. But the reality is that we've now have a media that goes out of its way to root for one candidate over another based on an ideology, not on a responsibility to report the facts. And so for most folks, it's more difficult than ever to actually find out what's going on, to have that perspective. When we were going through the early portions of the pandemic, there was one of the things that I watched a tremendous amount was hospitalizations. And even today, the number of hospitalizations that we have in the state of Missouri, which are at least partially due to COVID infection, represents about 10% of our overall hospital capacity in the state of Missouri. Now, the hospitals are always going to have people coming in, getting procedures, whether it's hip replacements or emergency care, that fills up some of the other beds. But instead of presenting this as COVID being a very small minority that's taking up our hospital space, it's presented as a near overflow of our hospital capacity, which couldn't be further from the truth. And that narrative is told to folks around our region, around the state, in a manner that's trying to incite fear. And I feel like our media is trying to get you to be so afraid of something that you literally cannot see. That we now have politicians from one major party, the Democratic Party, that are espousing policies that will destroy the economic foundation of our communities, shutting down our economies, shutting down our schools. These are the things that are going to cause dramatic damage over the long term and are going to empower those that are burning our urban cores right now. So at a very basic level, I think a lot of the folks here in St. Charles County, around the St. Louis region, are aware of what's going on. And I think that we're going to see the pushback to that vision, to that path on November 3rd of next week. So it's a very important time in our country. And now more than ever, like to your point, we need people to be engaged.
Well, and you covered it right there. I mean, it is a matter of philosophy, strategy for our own welfare in this, and beyond we all are interested in the welfare of our culture and our community. But when you really start to talk about the ideals that say this leads to anarchy, this leads to enslavement, this leads to poverty, it's never proven to work. I mean, I have some friends that get very adamant about the fact that they are on the other side of the fence, and they're saying, if you really care about people, then you've got to. And then I start to walk them through. I said, all right, let me understand what caring is. And if caring is helping people to then depend on the government, to depend on welfare, depend on government subsidies, you're really taking away their dignity and their pride, and you're not giving them the true opportunity to have a fulfilling life on this little planet. And if you really wanted to help somebody, and some people
Teach them to fish.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Give a man a fish, feed him
Say
for
it-
a day.
Say it, please. Yeah.
Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Feed them for a lifetime, and we've gone completely away from that. But it gets to where it just, and this is where I'll hit hardcore, that I haven't talked about this publicly before on the show, but to really nail it down, I alluded to it earlier, and to say that it is a matter of most people, ultimately, the real issue they're struggling with is they want to feel good about who they're working with or what they're doing to contribute, even if it's just to drive by and say, here's $50, you know? How often are they really analyzing that to say, did it actually help the person that you gave $50 to?
That's right.
Or did it just really help you to feel better, so that you personally, and you're not really helping anybody?
Well, first of all, I would say that part of the greatness of America is we have some of the most charitable citizens anywhere in the world. We have citizens that grew up in communities that were built on helping one another. So there is a natural desire for members of a community to look for ways to help out those that are less fortunate. We should applaud that. We should encourage that. I think that's always going to be very critical to one of the key fabrics of American life. That being said, we have to make a decision in this election. Do you want to make decisions for yourself moving forward, or are you more comfortable with government making many of the most important decisions for you? If you're comfortable with the government deciding what your health care should look like, how it's going to be paid for, and then to efficiently execute that, well, then the Democratic message is probably the one for you. On the other hand, if you're running a small business and you don't need a lot of government interference in your business, and you'd really just like the freedom and the liberty to make your own decisions and make your own way, consequences be good or bad of that, then you're probably going to buy more into the Republican vision, which is one that's built on those free markets. You know, we have seen over and over, to go back to your point, whether it's the Soviet Union. Again, you and I grew up looking at the Soviet Union and watching the Soviet Union come apart as they went bankrupt. And they tried to do most, if not all, of the same things that Joe Biden, that Kamala Harris, that AOC are talking about trying to do in America right now. None of those things, nationalized health care, the Green New Deal, none of those things were successful when they were tried elsewhere. We've been successful because we haven't gone down that road of simply voting ourselves more benefits from government lines. So I want to keep us in line with how the country was started and what it was founded on, and I think that's ultimately what's going to keep us strong.
I agree. And not to say that, if anybody knows what I do publicly, most people follow me and say, some people call me the king of charity, as if that's all I dedicate my time to. And I do have a big heart for that. And I believe that the method for these charities, none of them are straight up just give us some money so that we can turn around and hand it to people. That's not how they operate. You give money to a charity because they have a service that helps people to gain skills.
That's right.
Or to help the people that absolutely cannot take care of themselves.
Lift them back into independence. Right?
Yes.
You know, push them and encourage them so that they take the reins of their own life, and they don't need you. They don't need that charity moving forward.
And you don't ever want to feel as though you are dependent on anybody.
Absolutely.
That's just not the way God designed us, as a matter of self-confidence, you know,
right.
and true happiness. So that's why I just reach to a lot of people and say, hey, make sure when you're voting your conscience, and you say, I'll never forget a young gal I met years ago, and she goes, I have to go vote for the Democratic Party because they're the ones who actually care about people. And I thought, wow, I think she doesn't understand the real implications of what it is that ends up happening. And maybe the intention is that they're trying to help people. Maybe that's the case. Mm-hmm. But it seems very likely that they know more likely that it's not helping them, and it helps them to be dependent on whoever it was that kept giving them that handout and giving that person power, right? Giving them to say, hey, keep voting for me, and I'll keep giving you enough here just to survive. Not really enough to prosper, but enough to survive and just get along, and I'll keep giving it to you as long as you keep voting for me.
That's exactly right.
That, to me, it borders on evil. But you have to explain it to some people, because if you don't, they don't really figure out what's going on because they're too involved with their own life. So, Senator, we've got a number of issues related here to the St. Louis, or I'm sorry, I should say the state of Missouri, that are coming up. Tell me, of the issues on the ballot. When I started to review some of these, I sent myself a link that I can pull up. First off, let me pull up behind us here. If you did take a look here, this is Senator Eigel's website. This is a free shot of it because I noticed it changed. I wonder
That's
that picture.
that's me in 2016,
2016.
when I ran for Senate the first time, and I
just
I
the
would
same.
just want to point out to anybody watching that I really don't have very much gray hair in that picture. So if you look at me now, I have a lot more gray hair, and it's kind of just the cost of 4 years of politics has done this to me. So we can continue to focus on that picture, which I think is great.
Yeah, well, I can even stand up and move aside here, but yeah, we want to put you. Never to imply that you have a big head.
I mean,
On the screen,
he looks so young. I mean,
you look great, and you know I've also noticed you speak real well. You've been the MC or interim introduction professional for the different people at different events I've seen.
my wife would say I talk too much.
Well,
I speak too much.
It's a matter of practice, right? So she's just helping you to develop those skills. My girlfriend would say the same thing. So, and it's just a matter of, babe, just let me keep practicing here because as many times as I mess up here, that's less mess ups I have in public, and that means money for both of us if I can get paid for doing these things, et cetera. Build it up. But you've obviously been in office. How long have you been serving as a? Did you come in first as a state rep?
No, actually, I came straight into the state Senate in
Okay.
2016. I was first elected, and so I'm coming to the end of my first term, and I can run for re-election one more time before term limits would kick in. So we'll see what I look like 4 years from now if I'm successful in this election, but I'll probably have even more gray hair, but that's okay.
I understand that, yeah. And I didn't realize, because I'd seen you on the scene for a while, and you kind of rising to the top. And normally people do come in as a rep and then go to senator, right? But you came in right as a senator. And it's a Missouri State Senator. It's not a 6-year term like it is for the United States.
That's right, 4 years
It's
term.
4 years, and then 2 of those. Now, is the limitation in place for senators already?
Yes.
There's
Yes.
a term limit?
So,
And I know they're talking about one of the topics we can jump to, there's
That's right.
term limits coming up.
So Amendment 1 that's going to come up on the ballot next Tuesday has to do with term limits. Now, in Missouri right now, we already have term limits for all our legislators. So you can serve up to 8 years in the Missouri Senate and another 8 years in the Missouri House. We also have term limits for the governor and the state treasurer, which is limited. Both of those are limited to 2 years. Amendment 1 on the ballot that'll be put to the voters next week would expand those term limits to all statewide office holders. So the lieutenant governor, the state secretary of state, the attorney general, and the state auditor. So that's Amendment 1. It's a very straightforward question, easy to understand. Typically, questions that go to the ballot that ask about term limits of any kind enjoy very broad support. So I would suspect that Amendment 1 is going to be successful. But a yes vote on Amendment 1 is a vote for term limits.
And effectively, then it's a term limit across the board. And've argued that term limits aren't necessarily always a good thing because what if you got somebody who's actually doing a really good job? But I guess the theory is that they can do better somewhere else in up to 16 years until you got to go.
You know, one of the things I would encourage folks to think about when they think about term limits is when we talk about our legislative chambers, most of the power, especially in the House, the state house and the U.S. House are invested into 2 or 3 leadership positions in that chamber. Less so in the Senate, but certainly to a similar degree that the leadership positions are where a lot of the power is vested by the members. And so what may be a good point of discussion is limits on how long any individual can serve as a member of leadership for that legislative chamber. That would probably get a lot of the turnover that you're looking for when you talk about regular term limits. So, you know, that might be a conversation for the future, and that would certainly be something that I'd support. So right now, though, we're going to have a question about the rest of the statewide office holders on Amendment 1.
Okay, so that's Amendment 1. Is there an Amendment 2?
There's an Amendment 3.
I was gonna say,
There's Amendment 3 and
skip 1 and we go to or 2 and go to 3, if I understand.
So there's
And
going
3
to
is
be
kind of interesting because
That's right.
It's kind of a rehash a little bit, isn't it?
a little bit. So as most everybody knows, we passed 2 years ago the so-called Clean Missouri Amendment. Now, I was opposed to Clean Missouri, and I think that the Clean Missouri folks, which was composed
This
of
is to clean up Missouri, right?
it was good. The idea was it was going to clean up Missouri, right? They called it Clean Missouri.
'Cause the
Amendment
sewer,
1.
sewage or the rivers.
Yes,
or
you know, it was
nothing
going
to
to
do
get
with
rid
it.
of all the corrupt politicians a couple of years
So
ago.
nothing to do with our environment. It
No,
was all about
politics,
cleaning the political
ethics.
system.
And
Gotcha.
so what happened was we had a very strong, powerful group of well-funded, out-of-state special interests that came into Missouri, spent a lot of money saying very dishonest things about what Clean Missouri actually was, and it ultimately passed and went into the Constitution. Now, a lot of folks are familiar with some of the things that were on Amendment 1. They lowered contribution limits. They did a couple other small changes. But the change that was snuggled into the middle of Clean Missouri was an amendment that dramatically changed how our legislative districts are drawn in the state of Missouri. So up until Clean Missouri, what happened is we had a bipartisan commission that was selected by members of the Democratic Party, members of the Republican Party, the minority party in Jefferson City, the majority party in Jefferson City. The governor had input into drawing the maps that represented our legislative districts and what we have today. If the agreement could not be reached, it was turned over to the courts to weigh in and help solve that logjam. So you had involvement from both sides of the political spectrum, and you also had involvement from all three branches of government when drawing our legislative districts. Well, Clean Missouri came along, and unbeknownst to a lot of folks that voted for it, completely changed that process and threw the bipartisan commission out, threw out the influence of both parties, and instead empowered one position to essentially make the determination of how those districts would be drawn, and that was going to be the state demographer, which you'll hear about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was the state demographer. So
but there's a
explain
but.
Explain
there's a
that.
but, because the state demographer that draws those districts is appointed by one person, the state auditor, which is a single partisan statewide position. Now, it doesn't matter if the state auditor is a Republican or a Democrat. The idea of having a single partisan office holder be the one responsible for ultimately selecting the state demographer that draws the districts invests a tremendous amount of authority in a single position. It is the opposite of what we had before, which was an honest effort to have multiple parties in all three branches of government influence what our districts look like. And instead, we threw that bipartisan system out and put it in the hands of a single partisan office holder. So it was terrible. It was dishonest. The idea that Clean Missouri was about anything but the hijacking of our redistricting program is completely false. So now fast forward to today. We have Amendment 3. Amendment 3 was passed by the legislature. I voted for it. And what it would do, it was basically roll back most of the changes involved that were involved with Clean Missouri hijacking our redistricting process in the first place. So instead of having that one partisan position of the state auditor redraw our districts via their authority that they would vest in the state demographer, we would go back to the bipartisan commission. We would go back to a process that had Democrats and Republicans influencing what the districts look like, all three branches of government, instead of having just one office make the critical decisions. So I'm a yes on Amendment 3, and it is very difficult for someone to say, and there are a lot of commercials out there saying precisely this, that a no vote on Amendment 3 is a vote against gerrymandering. A yes vote on Amendment 3 is a vote against gerrymandering, because if Amendment 3 fails, a single person, the state auditor, will ultimately have the authority to gerrymander those districts however she wishes via his or her ability to choose the state demographer. So it's very frustrating, and we've seen a lot of polling, but there's a very dishonest campaign going on about Amendment 3 right now. I'm a yes on 3.
Okay, so help people understand. It's a matter of the redistricting, the gerrymandering goes on all the time, and it's done in a method to try to make things equally distributed so that people get fair representation.
It's important to understand that it's very hard because Missouri has a natural slant to it towards Republicans. I don't know that you could create a system that has that's going to draw every district evenly. That just doesn't exist. So what we have to try to do is try to make sure that communities of interest are restored, so that areas of St. Charles County aren't drawn into areas in the middle of the city of St. Louis, or aren't combined with far outstate rural areas that just don't look like St. Charles. The intention was to have communities of interest together. But what Clean Missouri did is it made it okay to draw maps that look as they look like spilled spaghetti in order to make sure the partisanship is as equal as possible. But of course, political parties change all the time. I can't imagine our founders wanting our political boundaries drawn based on membership in a political party, but that's exactly what Clean Missouri did. Amendment 3 rolls that back. Amendment 3 restores the bipartisan commission, which was really, I think, the best system that we could have had to get input from both sides, to get all three branches engaged, and try to come up with as fair a maps as possible. But Clean Missouri changed all that. Amendment 3, a yes vote on Amendment 3, gets us back to where we started.
Okay, so that hopefully clears it up for a lot of people, because it is a matter of if you want to put all the power in one person's control, that's what they've just voted for, and that has never been done before.
That's right.
If I'm correct. And now the amendment to that was saying, hey, wait a minute. And from what I understand, they kind of snuck it in.
They
the
did.
bottom part of the bill, and
That's right.
people didn't read and realize there's a lot of other stuff that was going on there. But when that came through, and they're saying, wait a minute, we caught this. Let's fix it and get it back to what was best representation for our citizens here in the state of Missouri. Okay. Any other core major? I mean, obviously, with a lot of political offices. Is it true Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft is up for re-election?
That's true. In fact, every statewide office is up besides the auditor, which is Nicole Galloway.
Okay, and she's
running for governor.
She's running for governor. It clear up for me a little bit. I saw these ads, and you never know what to believe. But is it true that she is potentially currently under investigation for some kind of pending? I don't know.
Well, I think
pending felony, or maybe it was already a felony already filed.
Well, I think she's under investigation from the Secretary of State for certain violations within her office. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but the reality is she has failed to denounce the same kind of anarchy, the same kind of criminal activity that's going on in our urban areas. She has when our firefighters and police came out and made an endorsement in that race, the person that they decided to support that has always been on the side of law enforcement is Governor Mike Parson. Governor Parson has made it a key theme of his campaign to support our police, to support the rule of law, and to go in and do what we can to not only clean up areas like St. Louis, but make sure that areas like St. Charles that don't have a crime problem aren't subjected to the kind of lawlessness and anarchy that we've seen some groups come out here to try to take advantage of.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of that has come out here. I did a little bit of live streaming. There was a neutral event, if you will. It was the Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, both converged up here at the Beale streets of St. Charles, and up to 60,000 people, 1,000 people at any given time watching that stream live. And I was like, wow, I'm getting as much as Fox News and some of the national guys, because that's a heartfelt topic. That we've seen some of that. The Michael Brown issue that put Ferguson on the map across the country.
And when you see Black Lives Matter block Highway 70 as they did in St. Charles, that is a crime. Those people are criminals engaging in criminal activity. And as a result of that criminal activity of blocking highways, they're endangering themselves. They were taking children out onto the highway, endangering their kids, endangering the drivers on Highway 70. Dozens were arrested. I mean, these are folks that don't care about what the law says. And if you come to our area, we have a good relationship with our police force, and we're not going to tolerate that kind of bad behavior. So, I think that's a message of protecting our communities that is not just appealing from a Republican or a Democratic perspective. I think that's appealing from an American perspective. I don't think anybody wants to see any of our communities descend into chaos like we saw in Portland, like we saw in Seattle, and like we saw to a certain degree down in the city of St. Louis. So, look at the city of St. Louis. The mayor herself, Lyda Krewson, had to move out of her own home for a period of time because she felt for her safety and took refuge from her own house. That's how bad things have gotten in the city of St. Louis, because the prosecutor down there, the mayor down there, are not taking steps to address the anarchy and the lawlessness on the streets. We don't tolerate that here in St. Charles. We have a strong prosecutor, we have good city governments, and we have a strong police force that we're going to protect ourselves from that. And we're going to let you know that if you break a crime, if you commit a crime in St. Charles County, you're going to be prosecuted. I think that's a winning message going into election.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people don't realize it's a matter of people say, well, they're restraining the expression of free speech. And I think the expression of free speech stops when you start to impugn the freedom of others. Free speech, that's out the door.
Free speech is not an excuse to commit a crime. Free speech is not an excuse to endanger yourself and others by blocking a major highway or blocking city streets. I can't rob a bank in the name of free speech. That just doesn't make any sense. And that is literally what these folks with Antifa and Black Lives Matter are trying to say. It's a losing message. It's a message that when folks are faced with that decision on November 3rd, they're going to remember that one party, the Republican Party, has maintained that property rights, personal security means something in this country. And then they're going to realize that on the other hand, the Democratic Party Not everyone in the Democratic Party, because I know Democrats that are not happy with that mentality. I know Democrats that believe in property rights. But too many Democrats, and in those that are running for office, have embraced the philosophy that it's okay to take from your neighbor, to destroy your neighbor's property in the name of free speech. That's just not right. That's not the American way.
Well, that's why I agree with you that now essentially two quick notes. Number one, Ben Shapiro did an interesting video, his take on the upcoming election, and said, I did not vote for Trump in 2016. And I absolutely am voting for Trump because he was much more conservative than he originally thought he may be. And he said, bottom line, and I've had friends of mine that are Democrats say to me, I had used to identify with some of the policies and beliefs of the Democratic Party, but they have lost their beeping minds. Yeah. And Shapiro, they've had to beep him out on that. But I mean, literally, you say that with the intensity because they have lost it. I mean, they've actually gone off to where there's nobody. And this is the point I want to help try to explain. Tell me if I'm online here, but that is a matter of the people that are being incorporated are brought into these organizations, Antifa, BLM. Some of them, Antifa, I haven't seen much positive lately. BLM, originally the message is Black Lives Matter. Well, of course,
sure,
anybody's lives matter, and we want to make sure. But they've gotten to where, and the leaders of the BLM outwardly espouse that they are Marxists. They believe in Marxism. And ultimately, I just go back to, it doesn't seem that most people, I guess LeBron James is the best example I have. Here's a guy with lots of influence, lots of potential influence, lots of potential power, and he's being used. Everyone is being used. They feel like they're contributing to something that makes a difference, when ultimately it's just they're being used to demonstrate and cause anarchy, to cause other issues that further divide us and make the problem worse. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that out of line?
Absolutely.
And they don't realize
this earlier. You can agree, which I do, with the words that Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. Who doesn't agree with that? Of course, Black Lives Matter. Without buying into the organization Black Lives Matter, which has gone out of its way to commit crimes, to commit acts of violence, to commit acts that have ruined the livelihoods of many minority businesses in our urban areas. And again, somebody said something today which I thought was very well said. It was actually, I'll give credit, Adam Schnelting, who's one of our state reps in my area, District 104. Adam, if you're out there, hello. He said today that, we used to have in America two American parties. And a lot of times in America, these two American parties would disagree on policy. They would disagree on how to make the country, how to get from where we are to a more successful or more prosperous country. But there were two American parties that still believed in the greatness of America, that bought into the idea that what we were doing was better than virtually any system of government that had come before us. But today, unfortunately, too many within one of those parties, the Democratic Party, have bought into the idea that property rights don't matter, that law and order doesn't matter, that protecting our cops from those that want to assault them doesn't matter, that it's okay to attack our police officers, to attack our firefighters. And this is so far beyond what we could even imagine 20 years ago. That's where we're at today, that the contrast and choice that we have to make next week is an incredibly stark one. We have to choose between two visions of America. One is the vision that you and I have been discussing for the past hour, the idea that personal liberty, economic freedom, and teaching your neighbor to fish so that they can be fed for a lifetime is a path that is honest and just and was the foundation that America was built on. The other vision is much different. The other vision is a government replacement for many of the activities that have been present in our society for more than a century. A replacement for government when it comes to our health care. A replacement for government when it comes to our education. A replacement for government even when it comes to our business through massive taxation and massive government spending out of centralized, powerful governments that are empowered by a small elite group of citizens and corporations that don't necessarily have your interest in mind. So I want to push back on that. I believed in the former of those visions, and I think that the Republican brand, in particular, has always been successful when Republicans have been accurately seen as the reformers of broken government institutions. I mean, go back to the 1800s when the Republican Party first began. What broken government institution do we have in the mid-1800s that the Republican Party came to power opposing?
Slavery.
Slavery.
Slavery
Absolutely
was a core
right.
issue, and a lot of people don't realize that the beginning of the Republican Party was with the onset of the election of Abraham Lincoln.
That's right.
And then he immediately came in and Emancipation Proclamation.
Elevating folks out of something as terrible as slavery was a core issue for the Republican Party. Today, we're looking at folks, raising folks, defending broken institutions like abortion, where we're killing hundreds of thousands of children every single year. Every single year.
More people
think about the economic drain that goes to our urban areas when we're losing all of those lives before they literally even have a chance to get going. Look at our broken institutions in the education sector. Look at our broken institutions in the healthcare sector. More government has never been the answer to what ails us, but the reformers of government. And right now, that is a banner that is exclusively on the side of the Republican Party. Reforming all those broken institutions, that's what's going to make us successful as we move forward.
So if somebody is currently someone who may not quite understand this, they're seeing pieces of it. That's why I keep broadcasting these live streams and talking about this hot topic. I'm the Cardinal Cowboy. I love sports. I love baseball. Baseball gave me another lease on life to pull a ventilator out of my throat that I felt I got from my competitive nature that was developed by sports. And I think that's innate in every human. I was talking to a gal, a late night conversation, I'll never forget, New Year's, and she said, socialism is by far the way. Ultimately, it's going to treat everyone fairly. And I said, what about the people who want to compete, right? My athletic background, they want to do a little bit better for themselves if they're willing to work a little harder. Don't want to work so hard? Live at whatever level you're comfortable. But if you do, she says, that won't be allowed. And I said, okay, so you're going to reprogram the way we are designed by God.
That's right.
And ultimately, that's why I say, somebody just has to get through this. In theory, my dad used to talk to me a lot as a kid. He'd say, the liberal perspective is always very endearing from an emotional perspective, that it does sound like it's a good idea, except that it just doesn't work.
That's right.
That's not the way we're designed. Talk about that if you would.
Well, let me give you an example, and I'll talk about minimum wage. Right, there is a move on the left end of the political spectrum to raise the minimum wage. Right, we want to raise it to $15 or $20, and it sounds good, right? Because if everybody's getting $5 more an hour, everybody's going to be more wealthy, right? Everybody's going to be making more money, bringing home more cash, and they can pay their bills better.
Just mandate that, and everybody will do it.
That's right. But of course, the funny thing is, if $15 an hour is a good idea, if $20 an hour is an even better idea, why not make it $1 million an hour, right? Well, and the reason is, it's kind of self-evident, because as employee costs go up, so do the costs that businesses incur. And guess who's ultimately going to have to pay for those costs? Right. The same consumers that are working in those firms in the first place. So it sounds like a good idea that everybody can get paid more money. But when you think about it, and it's good for today, right? It's good for today because today workers will get a raise and an infusion into their paychecks. But it's terrible for every day after today because costs will go up elsewhere in our economy to counteract that. Businesses are not simply going to accept less profit for the risk of their capital. They're going to pass those costs on to our communities, and ultimately we're not going to come out any further ahead than we are right now. We can't artificially mandate that businesses pay someone for value that ultimately the business wasn't already seeing was present in that person. The Soviet Union tried this. The Soviet Union set wage levels. The Soviet Union told businesses, this is what you're going to pay for a worker no matter what value they bring to the company. And it ultimately drove them into bankruptcy. And look how far behind they've fallen from the United States. So it's you're right. It sounds good, but when you really think about these policies, they don't make a lot of sense.
Well said, and it's something I think it's something they don't teach in our educational system as it stands right now. And boy, there's a lot of discrepancy and discernment with regard to what is being taught. Are kids now being indoctrinated from professors who have never built a business, who have never started a company, who have never provided a job, and ultimately, and tell me if you buy into this, and I don't know how much time we got. We were getting close to our end of our normal. Close to our
you know I could talk forever.
Yeah. So and there's no curfew, but the method is brought up by some who believe that, and if you read the book, which I have not read, but I've heard much about, I'm most afraid to, Rules for Radicals, right? And effectively they outline all of the things that are necessary for someone to convert any country into a socialist country, which I don't know why anybody would ever want to convert into, because it's a temporary sense of power they get, temporary means of power, because ultimately it collapses. When you don't have a means of competition and capitalism, you can't generate things and the money runs out. Right?
That's right.
And so here we are. But is it a method that has been used to use influence through our music, rap, country, you name it, the types of music that are putting these messages into people's heads, kids' heads, movies. They use the movies now to say, here's the way you can get there, this is wrong, and all these themes that are passed on. And then also then obviously the educational system that are just, and whereas the Republicans are standing by going, we're just over here making money, we got our businesses, we're good. And they don't pay attention to what these potential messages that are being spewed across and programming people. Is that partially true? Is that What's your perspective on that?
No, I think that's absolutely true. And keep in mind that socialism, a move towards authoritarian governments, is about control. It's about direct government control of more and more aspects of the individual citizen's life. And one thing we know about government is whatever it is that they're doing it much less efficiently than the free market could do that same whatever activity that is. And the idea, the promotion of socialism comes from a very core place in an individual that wants to have control over their neighbor, right? They want to make decisions for their neighbor. And so in socialist governments, power is concentrated in the few. I mean, even though they say, well, we're going to own the means of production and we're going to transfer power to the people. No, they're not. Socialist, communist, authoritarian regimes vest power in a very small number of elite, powerful, strong individuals. And I heard a speech once about how government power is the power of force. Government uses force to keep everyone in line, and the use of government force, which in our day and age has been hijacked in many cases by very strong, powerful special interest. The use of force by the strong has never been good for the weak. The idea of America was elevating the weak out of poverty, out of wherever they came from, and to a place that has more opportunity than they could experience anywhere else on the planet. The expansion of the power of the strong is never good for the weak. And the more you trust in government, the more you're trusting in the strong to control the lives of those around it.
Help people understand that concept, because people say, how are they empowering the weak? They're not helping the weak.
That's right.
And the truth is, if you really analyze our system, it is designed for the person who's willing to take the risk and work their butt off.
That's right.
Even if you're starting at the bottom. Whereas if you, or in many other countries around the world, it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter what resources you've got outside of being connected to the high, powerful people.
That's right.
You're not going to get there. That's all been controlled and taken away from you. Is that what you're?
Let me give you a really close to home example of how government works for the powerful and the strong, and not necessarily for the little guy. Last year, I voted against and filibustered a bill that was designed to give $50 million to one of our largest firms in St. Charles County, General Motors. The idea was we were offering an incentive package to General Motors that if they made certain investments in their plant, then we would reward them with an incentive of about $50 million. The idea was, well, if we give General Motors this money, they can use that money to create more jobs. They can use that money to invest in our area. And even though we had no control if they actually use that or not, the idea was that it would generally be a good thing. But my question was always the same, which was, why does General Motors deserve any money that every other company in St. Charles County does not deserve? If the only reason is that General Motors is bigger, and General Motors is more powerful, General Motors has more lobbyists in the hallways of the Capitol in Jefferson City. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of General Motors. I buy their vehicles. But that doesn't mean that they should be getting benefits from government that every other business owner that may only have 10 employees gets right here in St. Charles County. So I took a lot of heat because I was opposed to that, because there were folks that wanted to see all this extra money come to St. Charles County. What a lot of folks didn't realize is that the state of Ohio, just a couple years ago, made a similar commitment to General Motors for their plant in Lordstown, Ohio. This was back in 2008 when gas prices were very high. And at the time, hybrid GM vehicles were built at this plant in Lordstown. And Ohio offered General Motors $70 million in the hopes that that would discourage General Motors from ever closing that plant. Well, as it turns out, gas prices dropped. And now some of the most popular vehicles are not hybrids. They're trucks and heavy SUVs, which guess where those are made? Right here in Wentzville. And as a result, as the free market decided, not government, not General Motors, the free market decided there was a demand more for those heavier vehicles, not so much the hybrid. Today, the folks that were working at that Lordstown plant are out of a job, and that plant closed. This is a lesson that we could have learned, but we didn't, because we had way too many folks with power telling us that that's what we ought to do. So it's a close to home example, and it's a very clear example of where your belief set has to be applicable then more than just the easy stuff. Sometimes it does affect something in your community, and you have to be willing to fight for that.
And that's what I talked to some of my friends about. I did do a survey for those who were watching, and so I can wear this shirt now. I realize 90% of my followers are Trump supporters.
Yep.
10% are Biden supporters.
That's okay too.
We're working on them. Only from the perspective, and again, I get every once in a while I get a negative comment, and then my Trump friends pounce on it and say, "Do you understand? Realize he's helping." Blah blah. But for me, it's not even a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's a what's best, what both best gives the opportunity for us on this little planet for everyone to benefit and prosper, and what gives a short-term, easy. That's what brought to mind is you said, "Hey, here was a short-term, easy fix, and we'll throw some money at these guys, and it's going to benefit us." Well, they figured out fairly quickly over in Ohio that did not play out.
That's right.
And I think if somebody would have sort of you obviously did, but it may have been more than you could convey to an audience there to say, let me explain to you how this plays out. And maybe that was something that you didn't even realize what kind of example might have happened later because the gas prices went down and it caused the economically eco-friendly SUVs to be less popular. But it seems that if you manage to explain these methods to people, which most people don't take the time to, we know, and I joke about this on my posts. If you may follow me and follow my comments, my posts are generally kind of neutral, and then my comments come in and say, and here's why I think this, or people that disagree, I go explain to them why. And it's because once you analyze things, you realize the depth, like we talked about, when you give somebody food, when you give somebody housing, when you give them education, when you give them transportation, when you give them communication, everything has been handed to them. Now what do they learn to do as a matter of gaining skills when they normally would have gone out and gotten a job or train them at facilities where they can learn these skills, not just give them things, because if you're just giving it to them, you've taken the opportunity for them to learn away.
You know what we see when able-bodied individuals who have been receiving government subsistence are taken off of that, taken off of those welfare rolls. Again, we're talking about able-bodied adults that are able to work. What we overwhelmingly see is those adults go back to work. And I think there is an inherent desire within all Americans for the dignity of work, for the dignity of independence, for the dignity of being able to pursue their own ends. Now, we have many programs in government and our charities to take care of those individuals who will always need assistance for us. And I think whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're always going to support some of those programs, some of the programs for our developmentally disabled that need assistance and will always need assistance. Some of our those that need health care that cannot pay for it themselves. There's always going to be a desire and an ability to help those individuals. But for those that are able to work, and those that have just maybe decided not to work, the sooner we give them the gift of independence, the better it is for them and the better it is for our community. So I think you're on the right path.
And it just seems to me it's a matter of people don't want to feel as though they are not contributing. They don't want to feel as though they've been locked out of an opportunity to be part of something bigger. And when you're taking that right away from them, great conversation. We had Wesley Bell, prosecuting attorney from St. Louis, on our other show. You've been on the Cowboy Judge show also. And we had the discussion, and it really is a matter. This is maybe another topic that we can touch on and then finish up. But the penitentiaries are filled with people that effectively the historical method has been to, hey, you did something wrong, you've got to pay for that. Mm-hmm. Now they've kind of migrated to, I think it's been going for a long time, but you don't hear about it so much. Well, they say this is a true rehabilitation, and they're going to teach people how to better. Oops, I switched my switcher over here. Let me. There we go. You can switch. you
Got
can, it. There it is. Hit the wrong button on one. I never touch that button. Don't ever touch that button. Our production guy is lazy over here. But now they're really giving skills that they're training these people who are putting their time in. And they're saying you're going to come out with training for pipe fitting or for building construction or whatever it might be. I talked to Wesley about it, and I said, hey, man, I know I can teach kids, anybody that's willing to learn, the technical side of the world. This is our production guy right here, guys, by the way, is me, right? Because I had to learn these things, and I put together the cameras and the switches and the lights and the TV wall and all this stuff. As a matter of, here's something I have an affinity for, an aptitude for, and I've learned it. But I'm not unique. Anyone can learn these things. And I think if we taught people these skills, now you're really giving them a sense of freedom. They feel like they can contribute, and that ultimately is what gives somebody true happiness.
That's right.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I've been fortunate enough to run my own company. I've been fortunate enough to be successful in that company. there is no more rewarding work than to be able to have the freedom to pursue your own fruits, your own labors, and whatever that is. Whether it's owning a business, whether it's working in a business, whether it's working in a trade, all of these things. You're never going to have more opportunity anywhere on earth than you'll have right here in America. So that's why I will love America for the rest of my life. And I'll always believe that she has more opportunity for all of its citizens, regardless of background, regardless of skin color, than anywhere else. And I think that the more that we hold to the principles that got us here in the first place, which are those free market, economic liberty principles, the longer we'll be able to keep the success going.
Well, I am with you, and I believe that is the method that is best for all humanity. This isn't a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. This is a method of, hey, if we give people these options, we figured this out. It took centuries or many millennials or however hundreds of thousands of years it's taken us to finally sort this out. But we figured it out now, and there's no good reason except for some people who don't truly understand. That's why I said there must be a short-term memory loss issue here, because so many people, they are actually dealing with issues as if we haven't already been down this path before. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of helping people to realize those things have been tested and proven and don't work. Mm-hmm. We're in a position now where we know what works. We just have to get the other half of the people that realize it. I make the argument that ultimately it is a method of understanding that most people just are not attuned to. And when they understand it, they realize, wait, nobody's ever shared that with me. It's a matter of getting the information out, ultimately, is what I'm saying. And once people get the information and are fully informed about just the best way, whether it's Republican or Democrat, but here is the philosophy. It just so happens, I believe, that the Republicans are the ones that adapted this, and it came from some people's understanding. And they weren't born Republicans, right? They came up with this philosophy that said, hey, this is the method that helps us to create wealth and prosperity for everyone, and it can help everybody. Why do you think it is that, and this is where I was going with that, but there, and I'm thinking about multitasking here as I've got the whole show we've got to produce, but as we get into it, there are effectively a superpower elite out there that I think have determined on their own that they can gain the power, and we kind of touched on this earlier, by commanding everyone else. And if they can just get enough control and promise enough free stuff to enough people, they can have power. And they are misleading everyone, because the people they're going to give this help to are ultimately going to be taken advantage of and not gain anything from it. And we've got to help them understand that that does not give them what they're looking for. They're being taken advantage of and misrepresented. What's the method to get that out there? What's the best way to help people understand that? Because so much of the media goes, I mean,
there is always going to be the natural ingenuity engine that's driving independence and free markets in America. That we're the breeding ground for that. We have led the world in that for many generations. Every time someone gets an opportunity to meet their dreams and be successful, they're going to see that, and they're going to pass that along to future generations. So, but I also think from the flip side of that, every time our health insurance premiums go through the roof because of a policy like Obamacare, every time we see something happening in our schools that doesn't produce the outcomes that we want, it causes us to question the narrative that we're hearing from the media. It causes us to question whether or not all this government is good. When we have to go, one of the things we haven't talked about what policies I'm going to pursue next year if I'm reelected, but one of the things I'm fighting for is an elimination of personal property tax. That large bill you get every December 1st for vehicles. Missouri's only one out of 21 states that even have a personal property tax. And of those states, we're the third highest rate of personal property tax. So I want to get rid of that. I want to free homes in Missouri from that taxation burden, just like most of the other states in the country. And when you see that that's the message, that's what it means. It means you keeping more of your money. It means you keeping better control of your life, whether it's your business or your school or your health care. I think that's going to be appealing to folks. So we'll continue fighting the good fight, and I'm optimistic that message is going to be successful on Tuesday.
Share with you. That's an interesting topic, and to help people understand. When you talk about personal property, are you talking about the house that they live in?
Nope. No.
So you're talking about a car, a boat.
That's it's personal property is the tax that you pay annually on your car, your boat, your RV, your trailer. That's what I want to phase out. That's what most states don't even have that.
And that's what I thought you're talking about, because I know there's
not
a much
homes,
bigger.
no, there's a yes.
There's what is that tax called?
So that's regular property tax.
Regular property
and
tax,
so that's the tax that's on your home.
Right.
what we want to look at and focus on there is we've seen a lot of increases in property taxes around the state, in a lot of assessments, especially here in St. Charles County. We're seeing assessments go up 10, 15%. We want to look at ways to cap how much those assessments can go up. We want to look at ways to slow down the rate of increase for property taxes, because you pay. The average household pays a lot more in property taxes and personal property taxes than they do in state income taxes or even federal income taxes. So as far as a burden on our communities, if we really want to unleash the power of our local communities and the economies of our local communities, personal property tax is the first thing that we ought to consider eliminating.
Okay, and is that a matter of, then that is the tax that affects the poorest the most? Is it?
Well, that's right, because
I pay
it's
a
regressive
property tax, and that's for owning a property, right? And that's for help to pay for the schools, et cetera,
Right.
for kids that I don't think I have any kids, but it's a matter of, but we're talking personal property, because for
Yeah.
the people who don't own property, they still are paying a
They-
tax
that's
on,
right.
on their personal items,
On
not
their- on their car.
on their car and their RV, and those are the taxes that. Wow, if you could just relieve that from the poorest and the people who don't, they own a house.
It's
that's
very
what-
regressive.
And so it keeps, okay,
as
now I understand.
as a percentage of their income, personal property tax is incredibly regressive and hits working and middle class income households harder than high income households. So it's a tax that's very burdensome. I think it's probably one of the most unpopular taxes. And to know that 29 other states have found a way to pay their bills and support their local government apparatus without that particular tax, I think is something that we ought to replicate.
Well, yeah, well said. And it is a matter of how do you best help the people that are most in need, at what level? And yeah, I had never really considered the personal property tax. It's just a few extra bucks. I mean, it's not like $4,000 like some people pay on a house.
It can be, though. It can be. In fact,
well, but that means they've got an expensive car or
so
whatever.
so
Putting their
I'll
money
tell
in
you
the wrong
what,
place. Tell me how that works.
the average, if you go look at the average bill that you have for your personal property tax, the average household in Missouri owns 2 vehicles, and what you will pay on average for those 2 vehicles as a percentage of your overall net worth is far greater than what you're paying on your house for the median household value in the state of Missouri. So it really is hitting those middle and lower income or middle and working class households, and it's something we got to move away from. And if we are able to successfully move away from, that's hundreds of dollars every year that someone's going to have to spend as they see fit to meet their needs versus having the government take it from them.
Okay. Well, I mean, that to me is a matter of helping to level the field out a little bit. I mean, a lot of people do not have the resources to pay for such taxes. That really keeps people strong with regard to being able to invest in their future, to pay for extra education. And I do see that could be something that really does help make an impact. Okay. Well, again, we could talk for hours. Gun control, First Amendment. A topic that came up that recently was brought to my attention, somebody, I guess it was Candace Owens, was talking about it, and she said, do you realize that the black American population is around 13%? It would be at double that if there weren't so many kids that perished due to spontaneous, or not spontaneous, abortion. I mean,
That's right.
And taking away a human's life. And so when you really get into the issues that I mean, think about that for a minute. These are people that, if they had another 13% of the voting bloc,
right.
could better control their own destiny and have more control over their own lives.
Think about what they could add to those communities. Think about what all those extra lives, all that ingenuity, all that innovation, all that energy could provide to communities like the city of St. Louis. We have literally lost millions of Americans to abortion in the past 30 to 40 years. And at a certain point, the destruction of those communities is literally beginning with the destruction of the most vulnerable members of those communities, which are unborn kids. So we have made a lot of progress in the state of Missouri about eliminating abortion. We used to have over 20,000 abortions in the state every year. Now we're down to less than 100 because we have continued to restrict that procedure. So there's a little bit more, there's more work to do, and we have to look at what other states and continue to work with other states to continue to move away from that. But this is an issue of our time. This is an issue of our time, and the question is, are we going to stand up and defend the most vulnerable Americans of all? And my answer has always been yes. I'm strongly pro-life. I think we need to eliminate the abortion industry as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I don't think that this is a question of women's rights, because I don't know that it's ever been. I don't know where we have reached a point to where that's accepted as part of our society. So we'll continue working that, and we're not apologetic for it. But like I said, a little bit more work to do.
Well, great discussion, great topics. The election coming up is very important. There's going to be some big decisions here being made, and a lot of people may or may not realize that when you're casting that vote, if you haven't cast already, if you plan on doing so on Tuesday, November 3rd,
that's right,
somewhere at your polling place, look that up. You can find that pretty easily these days. But it is really, I think, your duty as an American, because I would argue that if you haven't voted, you don't really have much reason or effort. You shouldn't be allowed to complain as much. I mean, you still have your right to freedom of speech, but if you didn't even bother to take the time to go up and cast that vote, what right do you really have to complain when you could have at least made your statement by putting your vote in place? And more than that, share some of your thoughts, share some of your ideas with other people, because
right,
if you can have that discussion and you've never gotten into the political realm and you're just hearing tidbits and you're kind of getting the edge of what's going on, that's when things are not so clear. But if you can have that discussion, that's why we do the show. That's why we're so fortunate to have Senator Bill Eigel on the show today to talk about these things, because if you're willing to discuss them for your own benefit, it helps you to become involved, helps you to become informed. You then can better your own life and help other people along the way.
I like it.
And I think
that's a good place to stop.
I think you need to do that. I'll share real quickly on the wall there. If you take a look behind me, everybody, I'm going to bring up the TV wall. There it is. We built the wall, Senator. We built the wall. And so there is your site. We do have a little bit to share with regard to some of the things we talk about on the show. And this is, if you do know somebody who does have some hot topic, an issue, a subject, or who's just a charitable position and wants to help other people, you can see here, these are the updated rankings. Anybody can pull these if they pull their, if they have a quote unquote fan page. There you see number 3 and number 1 is Ann Allred from Channel 5. Number 2 is Claire Kellett from Channel 4. Number 3 is the Cardinal Cowboy, ahead of my friend Jasmine from Fox 2, Mike Bush from KSDK. I'm actually ahead of Fred Bird.
You're ahead of Fred Bird?
I'm ahead of Fred Bird now too.
Wow, that's surprising. I didn't think you would be ahead of Fred Bird.
And Anna Nicole, she's on Channel 5. I had worked hard, but Fred Bird, he can't talk as much as I do. So that's,
maybe people like that.
I've lost a few because of that, I'm sure, too. Steve Savard, formerly of KMOV, just recently released. My friend John Brown from Fox 2. Corey Stark, we see every day on KMOV. And Samantha Jones from KMOV. And so that's a great audience to be involved with. And I like to emphasize the fact that we do have a voice here because we want to help people understand and get the word out. I'm not just some funny, weird guy at the Cardinal game. Some people, maybe that's partly true.
But you are those, right?
But
you're not just that.
I'm not
but you are that.
That is part of what I do. And the bottom line is ultimately we have to get the message out, get the attention of the people out there. I've done a good job of doing that, but I like to stand behind it because as I started to get the attention when I first started doing this almost 22 years ago, back when I was 7, for those of you trying to do some math there, or close to that. Within a few years.
Remember what we said about media's got to be honest. Got to be.
Right. That's why I said or close to that. I shake my hands.
That's ish.
Right. 20-ish, 22-ish years ago, 7 years. But the bottom line is, and I felt like my mom was sitting above my shoulder watching me all the time. She's still around. I love my mom. They got the building named after her. Again, you're not supposed to get that kind of stuff until you've passed, but she's here. John Goodman flew in to do that for her. That was kind of neat. But I feel like she's always watching me. I feel like now that I've gotten this attention, just as something, after you come out of a coma like I did, you don't care so much what people think. You're going to have fun, and then life is short, and then you realize you better have a positive message that goes along with this. So then I realized I've developed a platform now to get the message out that if I came out of a coma, proved what I can do, anybody's capable of. Believe me, people that know me are like, dude, Carter can do it. You certainly can do it. But we get our message out there, and we share it as you see here. And then here's just our latest stats. This is 1 year worth of data, 632,000 minutes people have viewed.
That's a lot of minutes.
That's a lot of time.
A lot of minutes.
I don't think I could absorb that much in 1 year. As a matter of fact, there's more than that one person could handle, but it's possible, right? But 1.1 million views of the videos we've got out there. So if you've got something you'd like to convey, something you'd like to share, we would like you to do so and bring some attention to the leaders in our community, like Senator Bill Eigel. Anything next for you? Are you allowed to talk about that yet?
I just want to get past Tuesday.
You've got another 4 years.
Well, I just want to. We'll see if my constituents. What's that?
No jinx, right?
No jinx.
No. Talk about the future until what you got.
We got to see. I'm focused on trying to convince my constituents to honor me with another 4-year term as their state senator. So that's all I'm focused on right now.
Well, you've done a great job. Like I say, you do a great job of also bringing some excitement to the events. A lot of politicians get up there, ladies and gentlemen, we have the next person that's going to be on stage here. And
I could tone it down a little bit.
well, it was great because I could tell today there was a little lull. You were introducing the governor,
right?
And we should put that little clip up, but. That was a matter of, okay, he's not here just yet. And so Bill...
Well, we had flexibility. You used to say that in the Air Force. Flexibility is the key to air power. So,
and Bill
had to be flexible there.
Happened to have the mic in his hand. He goes, well, let me tell you a little bit about what the governor has done. Some of the fun, cool stuff that he's... And if you hadn't known those facts, you hadn't been informed, you couldn't...
But life is good.
Step up to the case there. But this is the video...
A senator is never short of things to say.
Well, that's good because they need to know what they're talking about, right? But this is the video from earlier today. The governor did get the opportunity to talk to the Cardinal Cowboy. His lucky day, I guess he would say, right? But I've been to a few events, and it was really neat because I happened to be standing there. Missouri Attorney Eric Schmidt said, why don't you, I was trying to get him on it because we're waiting, and the governor was right there. He's like, why don't you just stay right here? I bet you, as if to say, the governor's right there. He'll probably come over. So I stood there for a couple more minutes. If I'd have been distracted, but everybody's looking out for each other. That's kind of the way you get here.
Life is good.
And then there was the governor, and he got to give a couple good words. I got to speak to the governor. Very fortunate.
And the interview's on your page?
This is on my page right now. This is I cut it down to about a minute and a half. We talked to us. There was people coming up, wanted autographs and pictures with him. And but he gave some good insight. I had a couple poignant questions about where we're at, how the country is recovering, how Missouri's doing with regard to COVID and our economy, and he gave some great answers. So if you'd like to see those, this interview is live up on the Cardinal Cowboy fan page. It's also on the Cardinal Cowboy Carter Reth YouTube channel, and you can take a look there. And lots more fun stuff. And Senator, we'll also look forward to having you on the show here again, and hopefully hanging out with you a little bit on Tuesday night.
I look forward to it.
The election. All right, everybody. Thank you guys again for tuning in. This is the Cardinal Cowboy Show. We're going to be streaming live. All kinds of fun and excitement coming up. Stay tuned as we bring more excitement to you, and we appreciate you staying tuned for this event and this show for us here tonight. Thanks, everybody.
This is the Cardinal Cowboy Show.
Giddy up!